India and Pakistan appear in the news, the reason is almost never a happy one. It's usually a war, a terrorist attack, a military standoff, or another diplomatic dispute. After watching the same pattern for decades, it is only natural to believe that the conflict is the only relationship these two countries have ever shared. But before we accept that conclusion, let me ask you a simple question. If the conflict alone had defined this relationship, then why have India and Pakistan repeatedly returned to the negotiation table? Why have they signed agreements? Why have they cooperated on certain occasions? And why they have continued to talk even after some of the worst crises? The answer is simple. Because conflict may dominate the headline, but it has never been the entire story. So to understand that the hidden part of the story, we need to begin with the event that usually receive most attention, that the three wars of 1947, 1965 and 1971. Whenever these wars were mentioned, we immediately think about the destruction, and that is true because every war brings a destruction. But the real question is not whether there was a destruction. The real question is how those wars were fought. That is where something unusual begin to appear. Although the India and Pakistan fought three major wars, both countries generally tried to keep their attack focused only on their military target. These were the exceptions. Some civilian places were hits, that were mistakes that was happened, but deliberately turning entire city into the battlefield was never the military strategy. Now you may wonder why that matters. It matters because during the same century, the world had already witnessed a very different kind of warfare. For example, during Second World War, the entire city became the target. For example, in Germany, there was a city was bombed. In Tokyo, that was bombed. Hundreds of thousands of civilians lost their lives. So means destroying city had become an accepted military doctrine. When we compare these wars with the India-Pakistan war, one important difference becomes visible. Even while fighting each other, both countries largely observe a certain restraint. That is called the battlefield remained the battlefield. The civilian area were not deliberately treated as the primary objective. If that restraint exists during the conventional wars, there is another question naturally followed. What changed afterward? Why did the relationship become even more bitter? The answer lies one development that completely changed the nature of the conflict, that called terrorism. Unlike a conventional war, the terrorism does not distinguish between a soldier and a civilian. The purpose of terrorism is not simply to defeat an army. The purpose of terrorism is to spread the fear throughout the society, and once the terrorism was entered the relationship, the trust that survived even during the wars began to disappear. That change affected both the countries. India suffered repeated terrorist attack, and now the Pakistan also become the victims of terrorism. The group that once been the encouraged eventually now turned against the Pakistan itself. For example, the General Pervez Musharraf surveyed an assassination attempt. There were other attempt was repeatedly prevented through the intelligence that was shared by India. So that incident reminds us of something important. When the terrorism threatened both countries, they recognize that they faced a common enemy. And when there is a common enemy, there is need of a cooperation that become possible. It may not be announced publicly, it may not become headline news, but it still happens. The same possibility appeared again after the Mumbai attack. The President Asif Ali Zardari, he wanted a cooperation with India during the investigation. The political development inside the Pakistan that prevented that effort from moving forward. Even so, the attempt itself showed that the dialogue had not completely disappeared between India and Pakistan. That willingness to rebuild the relationship continued the years that followed. The other example we can say, the Nawaz Sharif congratulated Prime Minister Narendra Modi after 2014 election. He attended the swearing-in ceremony in New Delhi. Later, the Prime Minister Narendra Modi made an unexpected visit to the Lahore for a brief period. For example, we can say that for a brief period, the both countries appeared willing to leave the past behind. But just as confidence began to return, another terrorist attack that changed everything once again. The Pathangot attack that was shifted attention back to the security, the dialogue slowed down, the trust weakened, the optimism disappeared, and that is exactly the pattern that keeps repeatedly in India-Pakistan relation. The dialogue create hope, the hope create confidence, the confidence create the cooperation, then the terrorism destroy the confidence. Without the confidence, without dialogue, it's difficult between India and Pakistan. And without the dialogue, the relationship return to the confrontation. Yet, despite this repeated cycle, some channel of cooperation have survived. One important example is the nuclear confidence building agreement that signed in 2005. A political relation have changed the many times since then, but we know that the government have changed, the crisis have come and gone, yet that agreement still exists. And its value become clear in March 2022. There is a technical malfunction led to the accidental firing of an Indian missile to the Pakistan. India acknowledged that mistake and an inquiry was ordered. The Pakistan reacted strongly, but its military leadership exercised the restraint. That restraint prevented an accident from becoming a military confrontation. The significance of that moment goes far beyond the missile itself. It showed that the communication is still exists. It showed that the both countries understood the dangers of escalation, and sometimes preventing a crisis is just as important as solving one. For another example appeared during the completely a different crisis. While India was facing a military tension with the China in Galwan, the relation with the Pakistan was also strained one. Even then, the both countries reaffirmed their commitment to the ceasefire along the line of control. That decision helped to prevent the another conflict from opening at the same time. All these examples led us towards one important conclusion. Conflict has certainly shaped the India-Pakistan relationship. No one can deny that. But conflict has never been the only story. Alongside the confrontation, there have been repeated attempts to prevent the tension from becoming an uncontrolled one. The real obstacle has been terrorism. Every time the dialogue begins the rebuilding the trust, terrorism destroys that trust. Every time the cooperation starts moving forward, violence pushed backward. That is why lasting the peace has remained so difficult. So does that mean the cooperation is impossible? I will say not at all. Both the country continue to face a common challenge: the glacial melting, the air pollution that was caused by stubble burning, the drug trafficking. These problems do not stop on international borders. They affect the people on both the sides, which means that they can only be addressed through both countries' cooperation. But the cooperation cannot survive without the trust. And the trust cannot survive if the terrorism continues. That is why ending the support for terrorism remains the most important step towards building a confidence between India and Pakistan. Only then what we can say that dialogue become meaningful, only then can cooperation become sustainable, and only then can both the countries begin discussing the larger issue for their mutual benefits. Perhaps that is the biggest lesson from the entire story. The history of India and Pakistan is not simply a history of conflict. It is also the history of missed opportunity, fragile test, and repeated attempt to prevent the difficult relationship becoming even worse. Which path the relationship follow the future will depends on one question. Can trust become the stronger than the terrorism? Only time will answer that. And thank you for watching, and stay curious and keep learning.